All right. Oh, Algebra is kind of a funny band name, right? Not really. It's a word anyway. But it at first I don't think it meant anything to these guys. They're from let's see, the north part of Lake Geneva on the coast of Switzerland, and Lausanne, however you pronounce the name. It's a bit more of a lot of people speak French there. Um, so what are they? Thrash metal band. Chiroptera is their fourth album. It is. It's This band has an interesting history because basically the guy who's running the band has taken it over from two of the main songwriters. He was always in the band, but he left for a couple years to go work somewhere else. Blah blah blah, and he came back to the band. I think in about 2018, 2017. The uh, two main guitarist, songwriter, drummer, they had written an album. He performed on it. They were done on that third album, Pulse. I reviewed that. It's very good. And so he picked up and continued the thread basically with this album. I hope that makes sense because it took a while for me to get there. I spent a bit of time on this, making sure that I was uh, correct with how this came together. But basically, Ed Nicod had always been in the band, but he left at some point, came back, and now has taken over the band, but not in like a contested way. It's just like anyway. Um, there, uh, you'll see different conflicting reports from various people because there's classic early '90s metal influence here. Everything from Pantera to the edges of thrash around that time. They're huge. The main guy who's taken over, is a huge fan of Sepultura. You'll hear that all over this album, but not in like the obvious Beneath the Remains worship per se. I think he might prefer a Rise just a little bit. I'm more of a schizophrenia guy, but whatever. Same idea. Um, so this inevitably, when you bring together those influences, you end up sounding a bit like the lesser known thrash metal bands that were around at that time that were influenced by Metallica and punk and this and that and the other. These guys seem to have a pretty varietal taste, and that leads to me, I've compared their melodic side to bands like Stone, their technical side to like Universe era DBC and Oblivion. They've got a little bit of death metal in there even, and their earlier sound was closer to like I wrote right here, Mortal Agony and Mesro. Well, there's a whole nother can of worms to open up because both those bands, Mortal Agony started out as like a destruction style thrash metal band with crossover influences who went and became a heavier hardcore band. Uh, Whereas Mesro started out as a hardcore punk band in the early 80s and became a more technical thrash metal band by the time their album released. So at one point, both those places intersected with classic late 80s thrash metal and a little bit of crossover that was a little bit technical. And then we have, throw in a little bit of like vulgar, vulgar display of power and Sepultura. And anyway, at some point we get to what is a sort of a technical thrash metal record that will also appeal to someone who likes something like Megadeth. It's not cheesy. It is very hardcore-ish and blunt in the performances, but really, if you appreciate a record like Stone's No Anesthesia, where there's a little bit of a progressive tone to it, there's a prominent bass guitar performances in there, and there's a bit of a use of vocal layering to create harmonies. Um, you'll like what Algebra are doing here. They The way the songs develop is very much what I would consider like um, a tutelage of technical thrash metal that went in a lot of different directions because at some point you have to stop studying the thing and just do your thing. And I think at this point, the last two records from Algebra have helped this artist kind of find what they want Algebra to be from their perspective. And in a way, it's better than Pulse and more consistent in terms of songwriting. They've hired some very professional session musicians for this record. Um, yeah, this has the drummer from Turkish brutal death metal band Cenotaph, and he played on the last Cenotaph album. That was blew my mind with how good he was on that record. So very precise in this thrash metal style as well. I was very impressed. And anyway, yeah, it's a guitar album. It's a thrash metal album. You're just not going to go wrong with that. And these guys have been doing it pretty much just right from the start. And you'll see he's kept the sort of phrasing and ideal of the band, the old school thrash metal ideal, alive here, but elaborated upon it in a very nicely varied, uh, solidly just like 40-minute thrash metal album that really doesn't have a lot of like competition for mindshare this year. This is just a great record. So it might seem like a low score, um, only because I didn't really. I don't know how can I put it. There are so many records competing for my attention in September that there's no way I could meet Chiroptera exactly on its own terms. If it had released a month earlier, I probably it might be a little bit more. It's just that right now there's 45 records competing for attention in my head this month, while I consider next month as well. So that's more my personal rating than it is. It's just like this one, when faced with 40 other competitors, is still an 8 out of 10, um, as was the last. So I feel like at the very least, that score should indicate um, that even though the entire lineup of the band has changed just about, they've managed the same or higher quality. It's a fantastic album. I'll remember this album more than a lot of those albums that have bumped it out of the way in the long run. So it'll have its comeuppance, or its day in the sun when I do my end of the month and end of the year consideration for it. So uh, long explanation. It's just a great thrash metal record, and it's one of my higher recommendations for the month. So definitely go buy it, check it out, get the CD, and see them live if they're playing, because it doesn't happen all the time anymore. So get to it.